This is The Roadmap with Lee Heisman.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Roadmap, exclusively here on ASBN.com. I'm Lee Heisman, and every week we bring you some of the brightest entrepreneurs, CEOs, and business owners who are climbing the ladder, scaling their businesses, and thinking about how one day to exit stage left. Today, guys, we have a special guest, Grant Schuette. Grant, I've known you for years, and I've never used that last name pronunciation. I love it. Grant Schuette, the founder of Ignition Financial Services.
Yes, sir. It's glad to be here.
Grant, thank you for coming in today. You are going to be a breath of fresh air for the M&A space today, and I'm so excited for our viewers because you've been in this space as long as your professional career has been.
That's correct.
So before we get into Ignition, the company that you founded, I want to talk about your career and how it started in Atlanta. You know, we have a special partnership with Cliffco, which used to be called the Oxford Center. Our good friend of the studio, Cliff Oxford. Oh, yeah. And you started working for him years ago. Talk about that.
Yeah, so Cliff and I met back in 2016. Was originally going to work at a mortgage-backed security mutual fund. And so I met with Cliff through a connection I had at Georgia State, still works with there, Andrea, and just started talking with him. We met on a quick breakfast, and he said, I have all these M&A deals that I'm doing right now, and they're small, private, founder-owned. Do you want to do it? And it was just like a really quick conversation. How Cliff operates, and I think he figured that I wouldn't last very long. He always mentions that, and I come in, and first meeting, it's like 20 seconds, and he just walks right out. But ended up getting a really good experience out of that, and working very closely with Cliff, and worked together pretty closely ever since.
So what did you do for that organization? What did you learn? And we talk about the M&A space. Were you doing deal negotiation? Were you doing quality of earnings? Talk about that.
It was a little bit of everything with these smaller, founder-owned deals. So I was primarily in the beginning working on valuation, and then putting together the marketing materials like the SIM, and then obviously when it gets to the deal, working on just buyer due diligence and negotiations with Cliff.
So I find this with so many entrepreneurs like yourself that you throw around terms that are common to you, but for our viewers out there that don't know what a SIM is or all of these items, can you describe what that process is like?
Yeah, so the SIM is a confidential information memorandum, also known as a SIP, presentation, however you want to form it, but it's basically just a summarization of the operations, financials, all the details that a buyer would like to know about a business before they submit a letter of interest expressing that they're going to buy the business.
Fair. So you did this in Atlanta for a while, but then you went big time. And I know, I'm not saying Cliff isn't big time, but then you went big time and you went into the M&A space up in New York City. Is that accurate?
Yes, correct.
Talk about that.
So originally worked for Piper Jaffray, now they're Piper Sandler, working in their financial institutions group. So I was doing M&A and capital raise work for depository institutions like banks in the Northeast, Southeast, and then Texas as well.
So what were you doing there specifically?
So I was an analyst working on the sell side largely in my experience there, but it was just working on banks and how to form those deals together in the banking space.
See how humble you are? A lot of our viewers out there are looking, going, so you're working on these are hundreds of millions, billion-dollar deals sometimes?
Largely in the hundreds of millions, yeah.
Okay, just the hundreds of millions.
Just hundreds of millions.
Fair, I understand. Well, from there, you even transferred to working at the director of M&A, mergers and acquisitions, with the Forbes company. Talk about that.
So Forbes Books ultimately bought the Oxford Center from Cliff. They needed someone to run the M&A operations, and Cliff linked those two together, and worked there for a while before eventually just wanted to start my own and kind of work in the space on my own.
So right there, that's what I'm looking for. I mean, you segued perfectly. That was the direction I wanted to go. So all of this work prompted you. There was an inflection point where you said, I want to open up my own thing. I've been around entrepreneurs forever, selling businesses for them, but now you're going to do your own. What was that point that you said, I want to do this, and tell the story about how that happened?
That's a good question. I mean, it was really just, I've always loved working with founders, loved working with entrepreneurs. It was definitely a big difference moving up to New York and working with these large publicly traded companies where there's a board and a CEO that works for the board works for the shareholders, and then you go back to the founder and it's all in one. It's the shareholders, the main shareholders, the CEO is the whole driving force. He's usually supporting multiple generations of a family just through this one vehicle of this asset. And so I really enjoyed sort of helping them encapsulate that value through a M&A deal and seeing how that works just for not only a family, but a whole community sometimes. And I just really enjoyed doing it on my own, to be honest, and kind of liked having that maverick spirit. And yeah, that's really what drove me.
Do you have a goose? You're the maverick spirit, but do you have a goose? Do you have a number two at the organization?
I've had a
ones?
goose for a while. Right now, still looking for a good goose.
Okay, fair. And that's how you scale the business next. Talk about Ignition. What was the etiology of that name?
Big car guy. It's really as simple as that. It's just matching, something that sounds like driving something forward. Ignition and what's open on a domain name.
So, one of our previous guests, Michael Gargiulo, he's the master of domain names, of course, and I think you know Michael well.
I do. Yeah.
He's someone that we lean into for that as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, talk about this with Ignition. When you started this, a lot of people out there don't understand what's my business worth. Mm-hmm. How do you work evaluation, and what's important for a business to be valuable?
So working evaluation, a lot of it does come down to financial elements, but there's also the intrinsic parts. It's looking towards the future and how this company is going to operate going forward. So it's really a large conversation and looking at a lot of sets of details. When it comes to how a business is valuable in an M&A scale, I think it's a lot more to do with the founder and how they operate within their own business.
So elaborate on that a little bit.
So to me, when you want to sell your business, you really need to consider removing yourself from the operations as much as possible. And kind of a test that we would do is how long do you think you can leave for a vacation without ruining your business? If you can't do 2 to 3 weeks, it's very unlikely that you're going to be able to sell the business very effectively.
Have you run into scenarios where owners were so tied in? Can you give an example? Because a lot of viewers out there that are running businesses, they might not have what we call a G2 or a generation 2 that runs the business. Mm-hmm. That might be, as you know, working in the business versus on the business. Yeah. Give us an example of some bad situations that you've seen where people want to sell, but they're too encapsulated in the business.
Oh yeah, we've seen it all. You've seen some where they can't even run it while they are there sometimes, and they have a great product, they have a great downstream, everything looks great, but it's them sweating 90 hours a week to make it happen. And obviously, if they step away, it would all just crumple immediately. So it's largely to look at their team. Who's their number two? How strong are these teams reporting into each other? Are they reporting just solely up to the CEO? Like, does he have 9 direct reports, or does he have a handful, and then he has people reporting up to those people that are his lieutenants underneath? Those are things that are really important for a buyer to see, because ultimately they want to not work with you long term. They want to work with your team and see that it's scalable.
So when you've gone and done an evaluation for a business, right, to provide value, have you run into scenarios where you've made a mistake? Because Grant, I've known you for a while. It doesn't seem like you make many mistakes, but I'm sure, a lot of people look at entrepreneurs like yourself that have been successful and think, oh, this is just easy for someone like Grant. What challenges have you run into where you might have thought something, you might have valued something and made a mistake at it?
That's definitely happened. We go through a review process and try to eliminate that as much as possible. But sometimes, businesses are so complex. There's so many different elements to running a successful business. So many things are levered to value that sometimes you can miss them or just miscalculate the value in a certain piece or misunderstand the risk. So that certainly happened before. We get called out on. You fix the mistake, move forward, and you just try not to do it as much as possible, I suppose.
See, I've known you for a while, and I like how you said that. You fix a mistake and just move forward. Mm-hmm. You're not too delicate that if something bad happens, it's going to take you down and you can't even go forward anymore. Is that a resiliency that you found to be something that's key for your success?
Yeah, it's a piece of logic too, right? I'm 27, so I suspect I'll probably make about 1 million more mistakes. And there's a difference of it's speed versus perfectness, and you're never going to be perfect. You need to have a proper amount of speed. So there's obviously an intersection of some level of failure, mistakes that you're going to make, and you can't just get hung up on it. You learn from them, try to make systems around them, and just move forward.
I also want to ask, regarding what you've acquired in such a short amount of time, for our entrepreneurs, our wantrepreneurs out there, what advice do you have for somebody? What's your biggest key if they want to succeed not only in entrepreneurship, but also maybe sell their business or grow a business to sell?
Well, for me personally, I'm a big reader. So I try to consume information, pretty rapidly, and I just read a ton. If I want to learn something, that's how I do it. I have to just go slow and understand the logic of what follows something through. In terms of building a business, I'm more on the exit side. I'm in the early stages of building my business. But looking forward to it in the future.
Okay, fair. And you're still looking for that goose, right? That number 2.
100%, yeah.
All right, so for people out there that say, number one, I want to get this guy's brain in some way to either value my business, just to see where I stand today. And then even another angle is someone that might say, I might want to work with this guy. I'd love to get into the M&A space. How do people get in touch with you?
Yeah, so they can reach me at email, grant@ignitionfs.com, or, reach out through my website and query, however they'd like to.
What is your website, Ignition FS?
Ignitionfs.com.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Grant, thank you so much. I always learn something from you. Today, other than learning about M&A, I learned how to pronounce your name, your last name correctly after years of knowing each other. I've always thought it was Schuette, but it's Schuette.
Oh, yeah.
Spectacular.
It was great to be here.
Grant, thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, Grant Schuette, the founder of Ignition Financial Services. Definitely recommend reaching out to Grant, and I want to thank you again for joining us today on the show. I hope it was as insightful for you as it was for me. We hope to see you again next week for another episode of The Roadmap.
Thanks for watching The Roadmap with Lee Heisman.